Hello, everyone. Tonight we're starting somewhere quiet, a warm dining room in a lakeside town called Ridgewater, Oregon. The table is too long, the wine too expensive, and the pie on the counter still warm. I brought it, blueberry, my best one, and no one even looked up when I walked in. They told me to sit down and shut up at my own husband's estate dinner. Said I was just a widow. Like I hadn't built every brick of this family from scratch. So I smiled, stood up, and left without a word. They laughed when the door closed behind me. But by the time the sun rose over the lake, their accounts were frozen, their keys didn't work, and everything they thought belonged to them? Legally mine. And I wasn't done yet. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really enjoy what I do here. Also, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing that. Now turn off the lights, maybe get a fan going for some soft noise, and let's dive into tonight's journey together. I'm Margot Ellis. I'm 68 years old, and apparently to my own family that means I'm just the widow now. That night, I ironed my blouse twice, checked my lipstick 3 times, and told myself not to cry, no matter what. It was just dinner, just my family, just the people I'd loved and raised for more than 4 decades. We were meeting at my oldest son Darren's house, the big glassy place he and his wife Kara bought after James and I co-signed the loan. Not that they mention that anymore. They said we were gathering to talk about estate things, which I assumed meant the house, the lake property, the retirement accounts, everything James and I had built while eating boxed macaroni and skipping vacations for 20 years. I brought that pie because James always said it was my secret weapon. Thought maybe it'd soften the mood. When I walked in, nobody looked up. Darren was already pouring wine like some overpaid sommelier. Kara, in her gold heels and blinding smile, was clicking around the kitchen like she owned it, which technically she didn't. Their son, my grandson, Jack, he gave me a nod. The kind you give someone you vaguely remember from a funeral. The whole house smelled like burnt rosemary and expensive tension. 9 of us sat around the table, the same table I bought them last Christmas. Darren opened with, "We've been thinking, it's probably time we simplify things." I knew exactly what that meant. Less of me, more of them. So I asked gently, "Have you spoken to Alan about the trust?" Alan Kramer, our lawyer for over 30 years. James trusted him with everything. Kara didn't even look up from her phone, just muttered, "You're just the widow, Margot." Maybe just stay quiet for now. The room went dead quiet. Then Darren chuckled. Then Matt, my younger son, followed. Like it was all just the punchline of a sitcom episode I wasn't invited to. My hands shook under the table. Not because I was scared, but because I could feel it. The weight of being erased. It was grief all over again, except this time I was the one being buried. I looked at each of them. Their eyes glossed over like I wasn't real, like I was a name on a piece of paper, not the woman who stayed up with them through chicken pox and heartbreak and finals week and broken marriages. So I set my fork down, stood up, and said nothing. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of a monologue. I left the pie on the counter, untouched. Walked to my car. Locked the doors. And for the first time in 43 years, I let silence fill me, not with loneliness, but with peace. They didn't call after me. They didn't follow. And they had no idea what I was about to do. That night I didn't sleep. Not a minute. Just sat in James's old recliner, the brown one that still smelled like winter cologne and the pipe he never told the boys about. Wrapped in the same throw blanket we used to fight over during movie nights. Frayed edges, coffee stain, still soft. The house felt like it was holding its breath. I kept replaying the words in my head. You're just the widow. Maybe stay quiet. Like I was a background character in the empire I helped build. Around 2:30 in the morning, I got up, barefoot, cold floors. Walked down the hall to the cabinet we never let the boys touch. We called it the no-go drawer. Passports, titles, old tax stuff, things they didn't need to see. My hands were ice when I opened it. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe proof. Maybe hope. Pushed past envelopes, insurance records, birth certificates, and then I saw it. Thick white envelope. Labeled in James's handwriting. One word. Margot. I stared at it like it might vanish. James wasn't the sentimental type. He didn't leave letters. He showed love by fixing gutters and changing oil. But I opened it. Inside, one handwritten note and a stack of documents, clipped. The letter read, "If you're reading this, something's already gone wrong. I wanted to tell you, but I knew you'd try to fix it instead of protect yourself. The boys aren't bad, but they're selfish. Kara is worse. I saw it happening the moment I got sick. I made some changes. Everything is in your name: house, accounts, lake property. Full power of attorney. They don't know. Don't feel bad using it. Don't let them shame you into silence. And if they ever try to take what's yours, burn it all down." I was frozen. James had seen it. He'd seen what I refused to see. The documents were all official. Stamped, notarized, signed. The power of attorney, asset transfer clauses, trust dissolution, done 8 months before he passed. Right when I thought we were just going to appointments and trying new meds. He'd done it all behind the scenes, quietly, legally, completely. Probably after seeing Darren sniffing through the business books and Kara making those glassy-eyed, just wondering comments. I could practically hear James's voice in my head. Don't underestimate your own power. I made tea. Not to drink, just to keep my hands moving. Paced the kitchen like a woman planning a war. And maybe I was. At 3:47 a.m., I picked up the landline and dialed Alan Kramer. He answered after 4 rings, groggy. I said one sentence. "James left everything to me. I found the paperwork. I want to activate it today." There was a pause. "Does anyone else know?" he asked. "No," I said. "Good," he replied. "Don't tell them. I'll be there at 9 with everything you need." I hung up. Walked to the hallway. Stared at our wedding photo. Us on the courthouse steps. So young, so sure. I touched the frame and whispered, "I've got it now. You don't have to worry anymore." Then I sat back down. Slid the documents into a fresh folder. Placed it carefully in my purse. Because now, it wasn't just paper. It was a weapon. And if they thought I'd be quiet, they were about to learn who they'd just tried to erase. By the time Alan Kramer rang the doorbell, right on the dot at 8:57 a.m., I was already dressed like I had somewhere better to be. Hair pinned up, lipstick set, navy blouse buttoned clean. I had even pulled out the leather flats I wore to James's memorial. Not out of mourning, but because they were quiet, and I intended to move through that day like smoke, steady, slow, unstoppable. The dining table, my dining table, was cleared and ready. Documents spread out like a map of a war no one else knew was coming. A yellow legal pad rested next to them, its margins crowded with midnight scribbles. I'd written down every question, every possible loophole they might try to wriggle through. When Alan stepped inside, he carried the same soft-worn leather case he'd used since the boys were in grade school. I used to joke it looked like it belonged in a Western, not a law office. He didn't laugh this time. He saw the envelope James had left me, saw my hands already resting next to it, and something in his face settled. Like we both understood what was about to happen. We got to work without small talk. For 2 hours, we went through every clause, every trigger, every asset. James hadn't just shuffled a few documents around. He had built a wall of legal steel around me. Transfer of ownership? Done. Dissolution of the trust board? Executed and filed. Durable power of attorney? Retroactive to the week he entered hospice care? Solid. James had moved everything, every single thing, into my name. By 11:15, I had signed 6 documents. 6. That was all it took to become the sole owner and controller of the estate. The houses, the accounts, the lake property, the business remnants, even the Ellis family cabin, the one Kara bragged about hosting yoga retreats at. Alan made the final call to the estate's asset manager, gave them my name, my confirmation, and my voice as the only signature that mattered. I listened to it, word for word. All directives from this moment forward will come exclusively from Mrs. Margot Ellis. I don't think I breathed for a solid 30 seconds. Then Alan turned to me, more somber now. Do you want them to find out through a formal notice? Or would you prefer a less gentle route? I didn't even blink. Let them feel it, I said. No warning. Let it hit like a power outage. He didn't smile, not really, but there was a spark of respect in his eyes that hadn't been there the last time we met. The next few hours were spent confirming what I already knew. The brokerage firm recognized the authority shift immediately. The title company congratulated me with fake cheer on the clean consolidation. Even the accountant, James's old friend Peter, sounded rattled when I called to verify access. Everything's in your name now, Margot. Legally and operationally. No more board review needed. By 2:46 p.m., I had control over every remaining dollar. And that's when it started. At 3:01, Darren texted, "Hey, random Q. Do you know if there's a system issue with the cabin account?" I didn't answer. At 3:08, Kara called. I let it ring. Her voicemail started sweet, like she'd just tasted a sour grape and was pretending it was champagne. "Hey Margot, I think there's something odd going on with the family finances." "Nothing major, just checking." By 4 o'clock, the family group chat was humming. "Matt? Anyone else getting blocked trying to access the joint accounts?" "Darren?" "Mom, did you change permissions? What's going on?" "Kara?" "This can't be right. Someone's made a mistake. Margot?" I read every message, didn't type a single word. Because silence isn't weakness. It's the echo right before everything falls. At 5:05 p.m., I walked up the stone path to Darren and Kara's front door with the same calm I used to have walking into parent-teacher conferences. Except this time, I wasn't the mom of a student. I was the principal. The house smelled like garlic and desperation. Darren answered the door, eyebrows pulled tight. Behind him, the kitchen lights were too bright. Someone had opened a bottle of wine, like alcohol might cushion what was coming. I walked inside without being asked. No hesitation. Laid the manila folder on their granite countertop, bought with money James and I scraped together before Kara even knew how to spell equity. "You all might want to sit down," I said. Of course they didn't. They never do. Kara leaned against the island, arms crossed, pretending this was just a mild hiccup in an otherwise curated life. Matt stood back near the hallway, looking like he wanted to disappear into drywall. I opened the folder slowly, like it was a weapon. "This is the new structure," I said, laying out the documents one by one. As of 11:15 this morning, every property, every account, every asset, it's mine. Not shared, not contested, mine. Silence. Not fear, yet. Just arrogance doing the math. Darren laughed, that smug half-chuckle I'd heard since he was 14 and thought he could talk his way out of a failing grade. You can't just reassign things without the trust board's input. I looked him dead in the eye. There is no trust board. James dissolved it before he died. You would have known that, if you'd read the addendum filed last October. Kara stepped forward, skimming the paper with her talon-like nails. This isn't real, she said. It's not legal. I handed her the final document. Notarized, witnessed, stamped with Alan's office seal. She stopped talking. I didn't raise my voice. This isn't a discussion, I said. It's a notice. You have no claim to anything anymore. And as of this morning, your access has been revoked across all platforms. No one said a word. For the first time in years, that kitchen was quiet while I stood in it. I turned to leave. Paused at the door. And then I said it. Soft, but solid. If you want to talk about my future again, you'll need to book an appointment. Then I walked out. No speech. No tears. No theatrics. Just the sound of my flats on the stone walkway and the chill of an Oregon sunset on my shoulders. The next morning, I made coffee just the way James liked it. Old-school drip machine, loud as a tractor and slow as molasses, but comforting in that stubborn way only ancient appliances can be. I didn't check my phone right away. I knew it would be full, the kind of full that feels less like communication and more like a storm warning. 5 missed calls from Darren. 3 from Kara. 1 from Matt, who frankly usually only calls when someone's in the hospital or he needs money. I ignored them all. I sat at the kitchen table, sunlight cutting across the counter, steam curling from my mug. And I wondered, briefly, if any of them had slept last night. Part of me hoped they hadn't. Around 9:12 a.m., Darren sent a text that didn't drip with entitlement this time. No sarcasm, no smirking confidence, just, "Can we please talk?" That one told me everything I needed to know. They weren't mad. They were rattled. By noon, Alan called to confirm that Darren had attempted to access 2 estate-linked accounts from his business laptop, both flagged, both denied. The system was airtight. "Let him try," I told Alan. "Let him see what happens when he knocks and the door doesn't open." An hour later, Kara showed up at my house. No call, no heads up, just pulled her champagne-colored Lexus into my driveway like she hadn't tried to erase me from my own legacy less than 48 hours earlier. She was wearing oversized sunglasses, like I wouldn't recognize her behind tinted plastic and a fresh coat of lip gloss. The scent of her perfume, something sharp and vanilla-sickly, drifted through the air before she even spoke. I opened the front door but didn't invite her in. She stood on the porch, arms folded, trying to look composed. "Margot," she said, using the kind of tone you save for nosy neighbors and bad waiters. "We're just a little confused. Why would James do something like this behind everyone's back?" I looked her right in the eye. Maybe because he knew exactly what you'd try to do in front of it. She flinched. I watched her composure crack just a little, like the first snap of ice before the whole lake gives way. "You should leave," I added. "This is private property. And right now, you're trespassing." She tried to smile, tried to shift into damage control. "You know, this doesn't look good, Margot. There are legal channels for these kinds of things." I closed the door before she finished. 10 minutes later, Matt called. His voice was low, hushed, like he was calling from a closet or didn't want his wife to overhear. "Mom," he started. "I didn't know about any of this. I thought the trust just transferred. I didn't realize Darren and Kara were pushing for control." There was something fragile in his voice. Not guilt, not quite. Maybe fear. Maybe finally realizing that silence doesn't equal innocence. "You had every chance to ask me," I said, steady. "You didn't. That silence, that was your signature." He didn't argue, just hung up. That night, I made dinner. For myself. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans with lemon. Because I was done nibbling leftovers while others feasted off sacrifices I made. I poured a glass of Pinot. Let the house stay quiet. No TV, no music. Just the creak of the floorboards and the ticking of the wall clock. And then the landline rang again. I don't get many calls on that line anymore, except spam and fundraisers. But this time, it was Lily. Darren and Kara's daughter. 17, quiet, watches the world like it's a film she hasn't decided whether she likes yet. The only one who looked me in the eyes during family dinners. "Grandma?" she said. Her voice was small, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to call. I straightened in my seat. "I'm here, sweetie." "I don't know what's going on," she said, "but Mom and Dad are freaking out. They said something about money being missing and the house maybe being in trouble. Are you okay?" That hit me harder than any of the lawyers or lies. "I'm okay," I told her. "You didn't do anything wrong." She paused. I could hear her shifting the phone, maybe sitting on her bed or pacing. "I miss Grandpa," she said, almost a whisper. "He would have hated all of this." I closed my eyes. "That's why he fixed it," I said, "before it broke." She was quiet again. And then, quietly, "I'm really glad he trusted you." After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table in the dark. Not angry. Not even sad. Just clear. Clear about the fact that James had seen this whole thing before I did. That he had understood what I had been too hopeful to see. Darren trying to position himself as heir to something he didn't build. Kara smiling her way through manipulation, under the illusion that charm and heels were the same thing as contribution. Matt, quiet in the corner, hoping neutrality would translate to inheritance. And Lily, poor Lily, caught in the middle, watching her family treat legacy like a game of Monopoly. They were scrambling now, searching for paperwork they didn't know existed, looking for loopholes that James had already sealed shut. But what they hadn't realized yet, what none of them truly understood, was that I wasn't just holding the papers. I was the firewall. And if they wanted to challenge me, they'd better come prepared for the next blow. 2 days after I shut the door on Kara and let Matt hang up in his own silence, Alan called. His voice was tight. Not panicked, but purposeful. The kind of tone lawyers get when something serious just landed in their inbox. "There's something you need to see," he said. 45 minutes later, I was sitting across from him in his office, the same one James and I used to visit every April to sign tax documents and drink burnt coffee from tiny styrofoam cups. The furniture hadn't changed. Same navy blue chairs, same chipped mug on the filing cabinet. Except this time, James wasn't sitting beside me, cracking dumb jokes about deduction limits. Alan slid a folder across the desk. No words, just a nod for me to open it. Inside, account statements, loan documents, transfer records. All of them with Darren's name on them. Except none of them were supposed to be. Alan broke the silence. He used James's business line of credit as collateral. After James passed, that line was dissolved legally, You were the only one left with access. I blinked, lips pressed tight. How much? He didn't hesitate. At least $500,000, could be more, we're still digging. I stared at the papers, flipped them over. The ink didn't change. Darren had forged a partnership extension, signed James's name or used an old version of it on file, and used that to open loans. Personal expenses disguised as business investments. The new SUV he bragged about. The kitchen remodel Kara posted about with hashtags like #blessed and #hardworkpaysoff. That Aspen trip over Christmas, the one they said was a client gift, all of it funded by a dead man's credit. He did this while James was still sick? I asked, though I already knew. Ellen nodded. The first transaction hit 2 weeks after James's second surgery. The timing isn't a coincidence. I drove home without turning on the radio. The road blurred past, but my mind didn't wander. It tunneled. Straight to James's study. I hadn't touched much in there. Still smelled like his aftershave and cedarwood. His desk was how he left it. Organized chaos. Sticky notes, a cup full of pens, an old tape dispenser shaped like a whale. And behind the encyclopedias, his leather-bound notebook. He always scribbled in it during tax season. Just keywords and notes, nothing elegant. I pulled it out with shaking hands, flipped through it slowly. And there it was, near the back. His handwriting, slanted and neat, like always. Check Darren's withdrawals. Something feels off. Ask Alan. He must have suspected. Must have seen the signs and hadn't had the strength to chase them down. He left the breadcrumb for me to find. And I had. That night, I didn't sleep, again. I laid the financial papers out on the kitchen table like puzzle pieces, rearranged them, labeled them, cross-referenced dates and card numbers. And slowly, with each connection, I built a timeline of betrayal. Not just poor judgment. Not just desperation. This was theft, from his own father, while he was dying. And he had smiled at James's bedside the whole time. I didn't scream, didn't cry. I made another folder, labeled it in thick black ink, firewood. Inside, I placed every document, every signature, every traceable lie. Then I started listing assets. What could I freeze? What could I sell? What financial landmines could I quietly arm without setting them off just yet? I wasn't interested in dragging him into court that second. I wanted him broke first. Then scared. The next morning, I called Alan. Don't press charges, I said. Yet. I could hear him raising an eyebrow through the phone. I want him sweating, I said. I want him reaching for doors that don't open. Understood. That same afternoon, I made another call, this time to Peter, the estate accountant. I hadn't spoken to him since James's retirement party. Peter, I said, I need you to tell me everything you knew and everything you suspected. Don't protect anyone. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I had concerns, Margot. But your name wasn't on anything at the time. I couldn't investigate without permission. Well, I said, now you've got it. And for the next hour, he told me everything. About irregular transfers, about forged vendor invoices, about Darren authorizing maintenance payments for properties that hadn't been touched in a year, and how he, Peter, had started making copies, just in case. Darren was acting like he had a cleanup plan waiting, he said. Like he assumed once James passed, the whole thing would just default to him and he could quietly fix the mess with inheritance money. It wasn't just greed. It was arrogance. Darren had never planned on being caught. because he never planned on anyone else being in control. Certainly not me. That night, I sent Darren a single text message. You might want to get a lawyer, an accountant, and a very cheap apartment. I didn't get a response. I didn't need one, because the only thing louder than silence is panic. 3 days later, I got an invitation. A family barbecue. No irony, no joke. Just a casual group text from Kara, with a balloon emoji and one of those soulless messages that tries to paint over fire damage with smiley faces. Let's all hit reset. Backyard barbecue, 3 p.m. Sunday. Family always finds a way. Heart. Family always finds a way? I almost laughed out loud. But instead, I put my phone down, took a long sip of tea, and said to no one in particular, all right then. Because sometimes, silence is power. And sometimes, showing up is louder. On Sunday, I put on the pearl earrings James gave me for our 30th anniversary. Not the flashy ones. The soft, round ones with just enough shine to say, I'm still here and I remember everything. I brought a bottle of wine, too. Nothing fancy, just the kind I knew none of them could afford anymore. Not now. The backyard was staged like a catalog shoot. White plastic tablecloths that looked stiff and unnatural. Music playing just loud enough to drown out real conversation. Kara wore white, of course, like she was trying to prove she was still the picture of grace under pressure. Darren stood at the grill, flipping burgers with the same energy a high school kid uses when trying to stall for time before delivering bad news. Matt gave me a half nod when I walked in, hesitant, like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to be angry or relieved. I didn't say hello. I didn't ask how anyone was doing. I just walked over to the picnic table, dropped the firewood folder onto it with a quiet thud, and said, "We need to talk, now." Darren didn't move at first. Kara rolled her eyes like I was interrupting a Hallmark commercial. Matt reached for a beer like a kid trying to avoid being called on in class. I opened the folder slowly. Laid out the papers, forged partnership extensions, illegal loans, redirected funds, credit lines tied to James's dissolved accounts. This, I said, is what Darren did while your father was dying. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch, because people don't remember what you say. They remember how calm you were when you said it. Darren tried to bark out a laugh. This is ridiculous. These aren't even... I cut him off. They're notarized. Confirmed. Validated. Kara stepped forward, voice suddenly high and shaky. This is a setup. Darren didn't steal anything. James would have told us. I turned toward her slowly. James saw it. He just didn't trust you to fix it. And for the first time, she had nothing to say. Across the yard, near the fence, Lily sat alone, watching. I caught her eye. She looked at me, not with shock, but with a kind of quiet clarity, like something she'd always suspected had finally been confirmed. I turned back to Darren. You're going to start signing things over, I said. Today. The cabin, the SUV, the business inventory, all of it. You don't get to enjoy the pieces of what you tried to destroy. His jaw clenched, shoulders heaving. You're going to burn down the entire family over some paperwork? I leaned in, just slightly. No. You did that the moment you started stealing from your father's grave. He looked like he wanted to yell, but he didn't. Because somewhere deep down, he knew I wasn't bluffing. As I turned to leave, Kara muttered something behind me. You're just bitter. That's what this is. a bitter old woman who can't let go. I stopped. Didn't turn around. Just said, loud enough for everyone to hear. No, I'm the woman who paid for this entire yard, and I just decided, you're not invited back into it. Then I walked out the back gate. Didn't look back. Didn't care if they followed. That night, I poured myself a glass of that wine, sat on the porch while the sun slipped behind the tree line. The breeze felt like early fall, even though it was still August. And for the first time in months, I felt something settle. Not joy. Not even pride. Just freedom. And freedom, it turns out, tastes a whole lot better than apology cake and forced reconciliation. The next morning, I met with the real estate attorney. His office smelled like lemon polish and printer toner. He had on a gray tie that kept sliding crooked, but I didn't care. I handed him a list. The lake house Darren bragged about on social media. The downtown condo Matt had been secretly renting out under the table. The SUV Kara used to drive Lily to school, calling it a gift from Darren's business income. Each one legally mine. I signed the orders to sell or seize them, one by one. No ceremony. No anger. Just the clear, cold decisiveness of someone who's no longer asking permission. The lawyer asked if I wanted to notify the family directly. No, I said. They didn't invite me into the room when they thought they were carving up the kingdom. I'm not giving them a front row seat now that it's collapsing. By Friday, Darren's business account was drained of all fraudulent equity. Kara's credit cards were declined at a boutique in Westport. Matt called me, breathless, asking if the building manager was serious about terminating his lease. Yes, I said. And the next person living there will pay rent, just like the rest of the world. Of course, Kara didn't go down quietly. She showed up again. This time, red-faced, pacing on my front lawn like a televangelist unraveling on live TV, screaming about injustice, about what James would have wanted, about how I was ruining everything. She even threw in a threat about elder abuse. I stood at the window, behind the blinds, and watched her. Didn't open the door. Didn't speak. Just sipped my coffee and let her words fall like static. Eventually, she left. Probably because the neighbor across the street had come outside with a garden hose and a camera phone. The next day, I had the locks changed on the lake cabin. The day after that, the SUV was towed straight from Darren's driveway. Brunch party still in full swing. I wasn't trying to humiliate them. But I wasn't going to protect them either. James and I had built something real. Brick by brick. Sacrifice by sacrifice. And they had tried to steal it like it was a gift basket at a company party. So now, I was taking it back. Piece by piece. And I was doing it on my own terms. That night, Lily texted me. Dad's losing it. They're talking about moving in with Aunt Rachel. Is this permanent? I stared at the screen for a minute. The punctuation, the hesitation, like she was hoping for a gentle answer and bracing for something cold. I typed back slowly. Actions are permanent. So are consequences. She didn't reply right away. I saw the typing bubbles come and go, twice. I knew that feeling, wanting to say something without knowing if it would open a door or burn it down. But she didn't say anything else. She didn't have to. That night, I slept. Really slept. No tossing, no dreaming. Just a deep, steady quiet I hadn't felt since before James got sick. I didn't realize until I woke up that I hadn't even turned on the night lamp. The house had stayed dark, and for once, it didn't feel threatening. It felt mine. The next morning, I had a new email from the estate's financial advisor. Everything had processed. "You now hold 100% control," the message read. I reread it 3 times, not because I doubted it, but because I had waited so long for someone to say those words and mean them. Then the doorbell rang. I stood still, didn't flinch, didn't rush. Walked calmly to the front hallway and looked through the peephole. No person. Just a white envelope slid through the crack under the door. No return address. Just my name, printed in shaky black ink. At first, I thought maybe it was Lily, something handwritten. Maybe a thank you note. Maybe an apology she didn't owe me. But when I opened it, a single page fell out. A copy of a psychiatric recommendation form. Highlighted in angry red, "Capacity evaluation recommended." I knew exactly what it was. I'd seen enough of James's legal briefs to recognize a setup, a coward's chess move when they've run out of plays. Someone, and I didn't need long to guess who, was trying to challenge my legal control of the estate by claiming I was mentally unfit. It was bold. It was insulting. And it was almost laughably desperate. I didn't cry. Didn't rage. Just folded the document back up, slid it into a manila folder labeled DEFENSE, and drove straight to Alan's office. I didn't even call ahead. When I dropped the paper on his desk, he barely glanced before raising both eyebrows. "They actually went this route?" he asked, flipping the form over like it might reveal a punchline on the back. "Trace it," I said. "I want to know who filed it, who requested it, and who forged that signature." Alan nodded, already dialing his assistant as I left the room. 2 days later, Alan called me again. This time, his tone was all steel. "It was Kara," he said. "She approached a notary she used to babysit for. Guy owed her a favor. Tried to backdate the document and file it under a fake care request. We have emails." "How?" I asked. "Assistant turned them over," he said. "Didn't want to be part of a felony on a Sunday morning." I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. Press charges. They're already in motion. That evening, a county sheriff's vehicle pulled into Darren and Kara's driveway just as they were unloading groceries from the back of a borrowed sedan. Their Lexus had been repossessed earlier that week. According to Lily, who called me later, it all happened quickly. Kara screamed, shouted, sobbed. Tried to say it was a misunderstanding, that she was just protecting the estate, that I was unstable and manipulative. But it didn't stop the cuffs from clicking. Forgery, fraud, attempted court abuse. Darren tried to step in, of course he did, but the deputy put a hand on his chest and told him plainly, "Step back, sir." I wasn't there to see it. Didn't need to be. Because when Lily called me that night, her voice was small but steady. "She tried to say it was your fault," she whispered, but no one believed her. Not even Dad. I was quiet for a moment. Then I said something I hadn't even planned. "Some people don't break, Lily. They rot from the inside until there's nothing left but noise." She didn't speak again, but she didn't hang up either. And we just sat there, 2 people on opposite ends of a phone line, listening to the quiet. That night, I poured myself a drink and opened the photo album James used to flip through when he was missing the boys. Their toddler faces stared back at me, round cheeks, muddy hands, grins with missing teeth. Not because I missed them, but because I needed to remember. To remember that I had loved them once. Because you don't do what I did out of bitterness. You do it because you were the only one who remembered what it cost to build it all. And if protecting it meant sending one of them to jail, then so be it. Kara had bet everything on the idea that I'd fold, that I'd feel embarrassed, that I'd feel too old, too tired, too alone to fight. She didn't realize something very simple. I stopped being afraid the day they told me to sit quietly in a room I paid for. And now? Now I was done being polite. The arraignment was short. Alan sent me a message afterward, just 3 words. She took a deal. I didn't need more. I knew Kara would never risk a trial, not with digital records tied to her Gmail account, not with a notary assistant who had already given a sworn deposition in exchange for immunity. The deal meant no jail time, but a permanent record, a financial penalty that would slice through what little cushion they had left. Enough shame to last a lifetime, even if no one else brought it up again. Darren didn't speak to me after that. Not a word. Not to defend her. Not to apologize. Just silence. The kind of silence that tells you someone finally realized the ground beneath them is gone. I didn't gloat. I didn't toast. I just shifted gears. There were still taxes to file, property transfers to finalize, locks to change, paperwork that didn't care about family drama. I moved through it like a woman cleaning up a mess no one else had the decency to acknowledge. Because after all the damage, the lies, the fraud, there was one final question left. What now? What do you do when you've won the war, but the battlefield is littered with people you once called your own? You rebuild. But this time, you do it for yourself. The first thing I did was call Peter, the accountant, and tell him to begin transferring ownership of the small house outside of town. The one with the yellow shutters and the porch swing James had built during his retirement years, which were less retirement and more him finally admitting he liked tinkering more than resting. I asked Peter to put it in Lily's name. He paused. "Are you sure?" he asked. "She's the only one who didn't lie to me," I said. "She deserves something untouched." He took care of it within 3 days. When I called Lily to tell her, she cried. Not the kind of tears Kara used when she didn't get her way. Real ones. Soft, shocked, quiet. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. I almost smiled. "You do," I said, "because you didn't pretend." That same week, I made a different call. To a nonprofit consultant. I told her I wanted to start a fund. Widowed women, over 60, especially the ones who weren't allowed to touch the checkbook while their husbands were alive, the ones who were left with confusion instead of comfort, the ones like me, but without the documents. She understood. We called it the James Ellis Second Chance Fund. I didn't want a plaque. Didn't want a ceremony. I just wanted a hand extended in the dark for someone else who thought their life ended at the funeral. The first application came in before the website even went live. A handwritten letter from a woman in Kentucky said her sons had emptied her savings account the day after the funeral and told her it was for convenience. I approved her application in under 2 hours. One evening, while sorting through a mountain of old paperwork, I found something small and folded inside the back of James's retirement binder, tucked between receipts for dry cleaning and a grocery list. It was a note, scribbled in blue ink. His handwriting. "Make sure Margot knows she did it all." I just stood beside her. I didn't cry. I folded it neatly and slid it into the top drawer of his desk, right next to the original will. The keys. And now, peace. By Friday, I had closed the last remaining joint account linked to Darren's fake LLC. I donated what was left in the business inventory to a local startup incubator, something James had supported before all this mess. I sent a cease and desist letter to the one law firm still dumb enough to take Darren's calls. I wasn't angry. I was efficient. Like removing rotten wood from a house you intend to keep living in. The rebuild wasn't glamorous. It wasn't some movie montage of paint swatches and happy music. It was paperwork, contractors, budget sheets, emails. But it was mine. No more secrets. No more deals made behind my back. No more waiting for someone to recognize my role. I was finally the architect. And I wasn't building for them anymore. On a quiet Saturday morning, I sat on my front porch sipping coffee while a pair of young contractors replaced the fence panels James and I had been meaning to get around to for years. The new wood smelled fresh, clean, honest. I thought about the first night in this house, when we moved in with nothing but boxes, a half-dead fern, and too much hope. We had made this life together, and now I was restoring it. Alone, yes, but not lonely. Because for the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't surviving anymore. I was rebuilding. On my own damn terms. I didn't expect to be back at that same table again. The one where they told me to sit down, to be quiet, to wait my turn in a family I had built from the ground up. But there I was, standing just outside the dining room of Darren's house, holding an invitation in one hand and my own breath in the other. He had sent it himself, a text, casual, like nothing had ever happened. Thinking of reset, like this was a printer jam, not a I didn't reply. I just showed up. Because sometimes the people who try to erase you need to see you standing. Full height, no hesitation. When I stepped through the front door, the house smelled different. Not bad, just empty. Stale lemon cleaner and expensive candles trying to cover up a space that hadn't seen peace in weeks. Matt was already there, hovering near the window like he wanted to bolt but didn't have the nerve. Lily sat quietly on the couch, hands in her lap. She gave me a small nod when I entered, and I gave her a look that said, "You're still the only one I trust." Kara wasn't there. Part of her deal with the state was that she had to keep at least 6 months of distance from me. I'd be lying if I said that didn't make the room feel a little more breathable. Darren stood at the head of the table again, still trying to look like he was in charge, still clinging to the performance. But even from across the room, I could tell he looked thinner, smaller, like something in him had deflated. He opened with a line he probably rehearsed in the mirror 10 times that morning. "Families go through storms," he said. "We weather things differently. But at the end of the day, we're still..." I didn't let him finish. I set down my glass of water, looked at every person in that room, and said, "This isn't a storm. It's the consequence, and every single one of you wrote it." You could hear a pin drop. No one touched their water. No one shifted in their chair. Darren opened his mouth again, maybe to defend himself, maybe to throw out one last Hail Mary of justification. I raised my hand, and he stopped. "I want to be very clear," I said. "You told me I was just the widow, that I should stay quiet. But I wasn't quiet when I built this family. I wasn't quiet when I kept it afloat through layoffs, surgeries, and second mortgages. And I sure as hell won't be quiet now." I stood up, slowly, letting the silence sit. This table, this room, I own them, legally, emotionally, structurally. You're guests here, and you'll remember that. On the way out, I turned back just once. "You don't have to like me," I said, calm as ever. "You just have to understand that I'm done making myself small so you can feel big." And then I walked out. Not victorious. Not smug. Just finished. Outside, the sky was clean and bright, the kind James used to call porch weather. I sat in my car for a few minutes before turning the engine, letting that sharp Ridgewater sunlight hit my face. I didn't feel angry. I felt settled. Like I had finally stepped all the way out of a shadow I'd been living in for too long. The next day, I met Lily at the house I'd transferred to her name, the little yellow one with the porch swing and the crooked wind chime James hung up after too much wine and a near fall off the ladder. She was standing on the front step when I pulled up, wearing jeans and an old hoodie, hair pulled back in that way that means, I don't want attention. But I showed up anyway. I didn't think you'd come, I said softly. She shrugged. I wasn't sure I should, she said. But then I remembered, this is mine now. Isn't it? I smiled. A real one. Yes, and no one can take it from you. We sat on the porch swing for a while, just listening to the breeze, the occasional hum of a passing car, the birds. She asked me how James really was in the final days. Sharp, I said. Tired, but sharp. He saw all of it coming. She looked down at her hands. I think I always knew Dad was different when Grandpa got sick. More interested in control than care. I didn't respond. She didn't need me to. Sometimes the truth is just a stone we hold in our hands, heavy and unchangeable. That night, I got another letter in the mail. No envelope this time. Just folded paper, tucked under the front mat. From Matthew. Scrawled in ink that looked rushed. I don't know how we got here. I'm sorry. I don't know if that means anything. I read it twice. Then I put it in a drawer. Because some apologies aren't for you. They're for them. And you don't always have to respond. I spent the rest of the week sorting through the final property deeds. The lake house? Sold to a retired couple from Arizona who planned to kayak every morning. The SUV? Auctioned off. Proceeds donated to a women's shelter. The business assets? Liquidated, redistributed, and gone. By Friday, there was nothing left of the version of the Ellis family that tried to bury me. Only me. Only what James and I built, brick by brick, now cleared of rot and repainting itself. I didn't need a victory banner. I just needed this. My name. In ink. On everything they said I couldn't handle. And for once, nobody was arguing with that. Monday morning, just after sunrise, I found myself at the Ridgewater County Courthouse, standing in the hallway outside the recorder's office with a folder under my arm and the kind of calm that comes only after the fire's already burned through. Inside the folder were 5 sale confirmations, 3 deed transfers, and a list of canceled joint accounts that would have made any financial planner slow blink and whistle. This wasn't a performance. It was the paperwork version of a final breath. After the last form was stamped and notarized, the clerk looked up at me and said, "So, you're done?" I smiled, small, tired, solid. "No," I said. "I'm just beginning." Later that afternoon, while I was watering the tomato plants James and I never quite got the hang of, my phone buzzed with a text from Lily. They're losing their minds. Mom's crying in the garage. Dad's on hold with 3 banks at once. Trevor keeps saying he doesn't understand how this happened. Trevor. Always in the background. Always waiting until the storm passes to poke his head out and ask if it's safe. I didn't text back right away. Instead, I poured myself some lemonade, sat on the back steps, and watched the breeze roll through the tall grass behind the house. James would have called it a golden hour. The kind of light you don't chase. You just sit in it and let it find you. By the time I responded, it was evening. They didn't understand because they weren't listening. They still aren't. She wrote back. One word. True. Wednesday morning, I got another call from Alan. I've just reviewed another set of documents, he said. This time, it's about the trust they claimed never got dissolved. Let me guess, I replied. They're trying to revive it? Sort of, he said. More like using it as a smokescreen. There's a firm in Portland that submitted a request for reestablishment on Darren's behalf. Under whose authority? I asked, already knowing. They forged your signature. I didn't blink. Just set my mug down and asked, can we shut it down? It's already shut. I filed the cease order an hour ago. We were quiet for a second. Then Alan said, almost gently, Margot, they're going to keep trying. You know that, right? I'm counting on it, I said. And I meant it. Because desperation makes people sloppy. And I was done cleaning up after their messes. Now I was documenting them. That Saturday, Lily dropped by unannounced. She brought a pie. Store-bought. Blueberry. Thought you might want to be on the receiving end for once, she said with a sheepish smile. We ate it on the porch in silence. Birds chirped in the distance. The fence glowed in that soft afternoon light. New wood blending into old like it belonged there. You okay? She finally asked. Better than I've been in years. I still feel weird living in that house. Why? Because I didn't earn it. I turned to her. You stayed kind in a house full of noise. That's more than enough. She nodded, lips pressed together in that way people do when they're trying not to cry in public. The next week, I got a phone call from the executive director of the women's shelter that received the proceeds from Kara's SUV auction. She told me, in a voice full of gravel and kindness, that they were using the funds to create a job readiness program for women over 50, ones who had been pushed out of work, out of homes, out of relevance. I thanked her. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the ache of gratitude instead of grief. Because this fight had started as survival. But now, it was turning into legacy. I sent a letter to the judge overseeing Kara's deferred sentence. Not to press more charges. Just to clarify the full list of assets she'd attempted to include in her fraudulent motion. Let the truth be the weight. I didn't ask for a response. Didn't need one. I knew it landed. By Thursday, the news had traveled through the Ridgewater grapevine. An old friend from the book club called and said, I heard Darren and Kara might be downsizing. I took a sip of tea. Oh, I said, all innocence. Hope they find something cozy. That night, I pulled out James's old box of lake photos, the ones from when we first bought the property with a second-hand boat and dreams bigger than our savings account. We'd looked so happy in those pictures. So sure. I didn't cry, but I did laugh once. At a photo where James was mid-sneeze, holding a sandwich, completely unaware I was taking the shot. Even in chaos, we had joy. And now, I had the space to feel it again. Because slowly, piece by piece, I was sweeping the ashes into neat little piles. Not to forget, but to make room. Room for what mattered. Room for people who chose love over leverage. Room for me. The next morning, I made toast. Simple white bread, golden and crisp, butter melting just right. It sounds silly, but I hadn't done that in months. Just made toast and stood there with a warm plate, no one around to tell me what I should be doing instead. Mid-bite, the landline rang. I almost didn't answer. But something in me said, go ahead, let's see what kind of nonsense today brings. It was Trevor. Of all people. Mom, he started, his voice lower than usual, like he was trying to shrink himself. "Can I come by?" I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. So 20 minutes later, he was standing on my porch, shifting from foot to foot, like a boy about to confess he broke a window. I didn't invite him in. Not right away. We sat on the porch steps. The air was sharp with pine and distant lawnmowers. He wore that same faded college sweatshirt from a school he barely passed through, and his wedding ring was gone. "I didn't know about what Darren and Kara were doing," he said. I nodded, slowly, flatly. "But you didn't ask either." He looked down at his shoes. I thought you'd just let it all go. You always did before. That was your mistake." He swallowed hard, jaw twitching. "Do you hate me?" "No," I said, "but I don't trust you." Silence sat between us like a third person. Then I added, "And I don't need to." Later that afternoon, Alan called again. "This one's fresh," he said, and I could already hear the irritation in his voice. "Darren tried filing a small claim against you for damages incurred through unnotified asset liquidation." I actually laughed. Right there. Alone in my kitchen. "That's not even a real sentence," I said. "I know," Alan replied. "The court rejected it before it even reached review. But you should know he's still flailing." "Good," I said. "Let him tire himself out." That evening, I drove to the lake house one last time. I hadn't been back since the new owners took over. But they'd invited me to see the renovations. Turns out they wanted to keep the bones, the original kitchen counters James and I picked out in a dusty hardware store 25 years ago. The new wife, Shannon, met me at the porch with a smile and said, "I hope you don't mind, but we kept the porch swing. It felt like it belonged." I told her it did. She gave me a mason jar of homemade lemonade and said, "Thank you for building something good." I sat in the car afterward, staring at that jar. James would have loved her. She was kind in that quiet, capable way. The next day, Lily invited me to dinner. Her house now, yellow shutters, fresh coat of paint, new wind chimes that actually caught the breeze just right. She cooked pasta. Nothing fancy. The noodles were a little overdone and the sauce came from a jar, but it tasted like safety. Halfway through dinner, she said, "I'm applying to schools again." I looked up from my plate. "You are?" She nodded. "Just community college. For now. But I think I'm ready." "I'm proud of you," I said. She blushed. "Grandpa would be too. Especially if you learn how to cook the noodles right," I teased. She laughed. Real, loud, no hesitation. The sound filled the kitchen, bouncing off walls that used to hold bitterness. After dinner, we sat on the porch swing she'd repainted blue. "I got a call from my mom," she said quietly. My shoulders tensed. "And?" "She's tired, angry, said she doesn't understand how you could turn us all against each other." I shook my head. "I didn't turn anyone," I said. "I just stopped letting people step on me without wiping their feet." She said you changed. I did. Lily nodded like she understood something deeper than the words. She asked if she could visit. I looked out toward the fading horizon. "I think it's better if she waits." Lily didn't push. She just leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "I'm sorry it got this bad." "It got this bad," I said, "because no one expected me to get this strong." That night, back home, I sat in James's old recliner, the one with the squeaky lever and a secret stash of pennies in the side pocket. I held his old mug, the one that said, "World's okayest golfer," and just stared out the window. My phone buzzed. A new email alert. Another applicant to the James Ellis Second Chance Fund. This one from a woman in Nebraska. Her kids had drained her retirement account after convincing her to sign some temporary papers. She was 72. I approved her request instantly. And then I cried. Not out of sadness. Out of awe. Because, for the first time, I wasn't just cleaning up the past. I was building something for the future. The following morning, a letter arrived from the county clerk confirming the final title transfer of the downtown condo Matt had been squatting in. I slid it into the firewood folder. Then I placed the folder into a fireproof lockbox. Labeled it Done. Because I was. I woke up the next day to the sound of a garbage truck clanging down the street and realized it was the first morning in a long time I didn't dread what my phone might say. No bank alerts, no lawyers, no family drama in all caps. Just a clean Wednesday. The kind where you realize peace doesn't arrive with a trumpet, it creeps in during the silence you fought to make. I made eggs, walked barefoot across the tile, opened the window for fresh air, and didn't check my phone until I'd had 2 full sips of coffee. When I did, there it was. Another text from Darren. We should talk. Things got out of hand. Out of hand? That's what he called it. No mention of the lies, the fraud, the forged documents, the attempted takedown. Just, things got out of hand. I stared at the screen, then deleted the message without responding. Because that's what you do when someone hands you an empty sentence and expects it to fix a flaunt. Later that afternoon, Alan sent over one final packet. It was thick, formal, sealed with a gold clip and a note on top that read, "This contains every closed file, in your name only. No shared access, no pending claims. It's all yours, Margot." I didn't open it right away. I sat with it on my lap for a long time, watched a squirrel race across the fence, listened to the neighbor's lawnmower hum and fade. Then I opened it. Inside, everything we'd fought over. Titles, deeds, account closures, documentation of legal authority. A whole life's worth of assets I had protected, not stolen, not clung to, but defended. And there it was again, that feeling I'd started recognizing like a soft knock on the door of my chest. Peace. The kind you earn. The kind that doesn't ask for applause. Around 5, I got a knock at the door. It wasn't loud. I figured it might be Lily, or maybe my neighbor returning the gardening shears he never asked to borrow. But when I opened it, I saw 2 things. A bouquet of half-wilted flowers. Kara. She was standing there like someone who hadn't planned what to say and hoped the flowers would carry the weight. "I'm not here to start something," she said quickly. "I believe that," I replied, my tone flat as slate. I wanted to see you face to face." "You already did," I said, "twice. Once when you tried to erase me, and once when they cuffed you." She winced. That part I didn't enjoy, but I didn't flinch either. "I know I crossed a line," she said, pressing the bouquet closer to her chest like a shield. Or several. I didn't say anything, just stepped aside half an inch. "Leave them on the bench." She placed the flowers gently on the porch bench like they were made of glass. "I'm sorry," she said. And for the first time since this started, her voice didn't sound rehearsed. It sounded tired. Real. I nodded once. A small one, not forgiveness, just acknowledgement. She left without expecting more. And that, honestly, was enough. Later, I took the flowers inside, unwrapped them. Some stems were broken, a few petals already browning at the edges. But the vase I placed them in was crystal. Because even flawed offerings deserve something real to hold them. That weekend, Lily invited me over again. This time, she'd cooked better pasta. Progress. We sat outside under string lights she'd wrapped along the fence herself. She showed me the school brochure she was thinking of applying to. Psychology. Trying to make sense of people like us? I asked with a smirk. Maybe just trying to understand why people lie to the ones they love, she said. Because love doesn't always come with wisdom, I said. Sometimes it just comes with fear. And fear makes people stupid. She nodded, thought about that. Then she said, "You ever think about forgiving them?" "Every day," I said, "and every day I choose not to." Not yet. Because forgiveness without accountability is just enabling. We toasted with sparkling water. To clarity. On Monday, a young woman named Jamie came to my door. She was the first recipient of the Second Chance Fund to travel through Ridgewater on her way to restart her life in Seattle. Early 40s, wore a weathered backpack and kind eyes. She hugged me like I was her grandmother, and I didn't even know her middle name. But I hugged her back because we did know something about each other. The sensation of being left behind and deciding that was never going to happen again. By Thursday, everything was finalized. Every loose string tied, every paper in place, every attempt to undercut me blocked, logged, and neutralized. Darren had stopped texting. Matt had sent one last email offering to rebuild our connection. I marked it unread and filed it. I didn't need to reread hollow apologies anymore. They don't stitch anything. They just sit there and collect dust. That night, I lit a candle, turned off all the lights, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat on the porch, not watching the past, not fearing the future, just breathing. Like the quiet was enough. Because, for the first time in decades, it was. The call came on a rainy Friday morning, the kind of day that makes you want to crawl back into bed with a cup of tea and something soft playing in the background. It was from Lily. "Grandma," she said, voice a little shaky, "Dad wants to see you. Just once." I paused. Not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to feel every second of that request. The weight of it, the audacity, the ripple it sent through a house that had finally gone still. "What does he want?" I asked. She hesitated. "I think he just wants to say something. He's been different lately." I knew that tone. Hope mixed with caution. The same tone I used to speak in when James and I fought, and I wasn't ready to forgive him yet, but wanted to leave the door cracked. "I'll think about it," I said. And I meant it. I spent the next few hours in James's study, going through what was left of the old drawers and boxes. You'd think by now I'd have found every last envelope, every forgotten photo. But grief has a way of folding time and hiding things in corners you swore were already empty. In the back of the bottom drawer, I found an old paper menu from our first date, a little seafood place on the coast. He'd circled the shrimp linguine and written "too risky" in the margin like a nervous teenager. I smiled and left it there. Some memories aren't meant to be refiled. They're meant to wait for the right kind of silence. That evening, I called Alan. "Tactically," I said, "is there any reason I shouldn't meet with Darren?" "No," he replied. "But emotionally? You might want to make sure you've locked every door before you do." "Fair." I thanked him. Then I called Lily back. "Tell him I'll meet him," I said, "but not at his house, not at mine." She suggested the diner just off Main Street, the one with the blue booths and the jukebox that only plays Elvis and sad country songs. We settled on Sunday at 2 p.m. I wore a navy cardigan, one James had always said made me look annoyingly elegant. I wanted to look calm, collected, but not cold. Darren was already there when I arrived, sitting in a booth with his hands wrapped around a coffee cup like it was the only warm thing left in his life. He looked tired, the kind of tired that doesn't come from lost sleep, but from having to finally live in the mess you made. He stood when I approached. I didn't offer a hug, and he didn't try to force one. I slid into the booth across from him, folded my hands on the table, and waited. He cleared his throat. "I don't really know how to do this," he said. "I know," I said. "Try anyway." He nodded slowly, took a breath, and began. I was angry. At Dad, at you, at myself, though I wouldn't have admitted that at the time. "I remember," I said. "I was there." He smiled faintly. The sad kind. I thought the money would make things easier. I told myself I deserved it, that I'd been patient long enough, that I could fix things later once I had control. He looked up, eyes a little glassy. But I was wrong. Silence settled between us again, softer this time. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said, "just understanding." I let that sit for a minute. Then I said, "Understanding doesn't mean forgetting. And it doesn't mean inviting someone back into the part of your life they burned down." He nodded. "I just needed to say it," he said, "that I'm sorry. And that I'm not proud of the man I became." I stared at him for a long time, then finally said, "Good. Then don't become him again." He smiled, this time just a flicker, and reached into his coat pocket. "I wanted to give you something." He slid a small envelope across the table. I didn't open it. "Is it going to hurt me?" I asked. "No," he said. "I think it might actually help." I waited until I got home to open it. Inside was a copy of James's original fishing license. Darren had kept it. Tucked inside was a note, scrawled in Darren's handwriting. "I remember more than you think. I just didn't know how to say any of it until now." It didn't make things right, but it made them real. And sometimes that's a start. The next day, I visited the cemetery for the first time in months. Brought a fresh thermos of coffee and a newspaper, like I used to do when James was in the hospital. The grass was wet from last night's rain. The air smelled like pine needles and memory. I sat on the bench beside his stone and poured 2 cups. "One for me." "One for him." "I did it," I said. Then after a long pause added, "They didn't see it coming. But you did." I sat there until the coffee went cold. That night, I wrote my first letter for the Second Chance Fund newsletter. It wasn't formal. It wasn't polished. But it was true. To every woman who's been told she's too late, too old, too polite, too emotional, too fragile to take her life back. You're not. You're right on time, and you don't need anyone's permission. I didn't sign it, Margot Ellis. I signed it. The widow who wouldn't sit down. I kept the envelope from Darren in a drawer. Not because I planned to revisit it often, but because it marked something important. The exact moment the fight turned into something else. Not forgiveness, exactly, but a shift. A recognition that even the people who hurt you the most are still capable of showing up with trembling hands and a trace of remorse. But that didn't mean I was letting my guard down. The next week, I met with the local credit union manager, the same one James and I had worked with for years, the same one who sent a sympathy card after his passing. Handwritten and genuine. "Everything clear now?" he asked as I reviewed the last of the joint account closures. "Crystal," I said, and this time no one else gets a key." He nodded, stamped the documents, and handed me a copy of my updated profile. Sole account holder, Margot Ellis. It was the kind of sentence that looked simple on paper, but had taken me months to earn. By Tuesday, the house finally felt different. Not quieter, just lighter. I opened windows. I moved furniture. I gave away old throw pillows James hated, but I had kept out of habit. It wasn't a makeover. It was a release. I even painted the guest room, pale green, like the walls in our first apartment back when we couldn't afford curtains, and thought toast was a meal if you added butter and salt. That night, Lily came over with a stack of used textbooks she'd bought for community college. I made grilled cheese and tomato soup, and we sat at the table eating like two people who'd been through different wars but ended up on the same side anyway. "Have you heard from Trevor?" she asked. "Briefly," I said. He emailed a PDF of an apology letter, like it was a resume cover sheet. She laughed. "That sounds exactly like him." "Still has great penmanship, though," I added. We laughed for a long time, and for once it wasn't tinged with sadness. A few days later, I got a handwritten card from one of the fund recipients. Her name was Marlene. She was 71 and living in Ohio. Her husband had passed 2 years ago, and her children hadn't waited a week before emptying their names onto joint accounts. "I didn't know it was legal," she wrote. "I didn't know I could fight back. Until I heard your story. I just wanted to say thank you for showing me how." I sat on the porch, card in hand, heart somewhere between full and broken. Because this was what it had all been for. Not just the money, not just the estate, but the blueprint, the signal flare, the proof that silence could be shattered if you dared to speak. That Saturday, Lily and I drove to the old bookstore downtown, the one James used to get lost in for hours, always leaving with more history biographies than we had shelf space for. We passed a woman there, probably late 60s, hunched over a shelf labeled Legal and Retirement Planning. Her hands trembled slightly as she flipped through pages. I didn't say anything, just walked over, picked up a copy of a basic estate law guide, and handed it to her with a small smile. She smiled back, nodded, and whispered, "Thank you." I wasn't sure what I was even looking for. I knew that feeling. We all do, in the beginning. On the drive home, Lily was quiet for a bit. Then she said, "I think I want to major in human services." "Oh yeah?" "Yeah, I want to help people like you, like her, like me, honestly." I reached over and squeezed her hand gently. "I think you already do." The following week, I officially launched the local extension of the James Ellis Second Chance Fund. We partnered with 2 legal aid clinics and 1 credit union, willing to waive setup fees for qualifying women. I didn't cut a ribbon. I didn't want speeches. I just stood there with a stack of welcome folders and a basket of lemon muffins Lily had baked from a box mix she messed up twice before getting right. It wasn't perfect, but it was beautiful. Because it was real. Then, just as I thought maybe, just maybe, things had finally evened out, I got one last letter. From Kara. Typed. Formal. 2 pages. She was contesting the timing of the cabin sale, claiming the transition of ownership had occurred during a period of emotional distress, and that she intended to file a petition for review. Alan called me the moment he got the court notification. "Do you want me to squash it?" he asked. "No," I said. "Really?" "Yes. I want to show up, just once, just to look her in the eye, and let her see that I'm still standing." He paused, then replied, "You've got that kind of energy today, huh?" "I've got that kind of energy every day now." The hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. I wore charcoal gray, hair pinned back. The same lipstick I wore the day I first read James's letter. Kara arrived in a beige pantsuit that looked expensive and uncomfortable. She didn't make eye contact. Her attorney, a young man who looked like he practiced his arguments in the mirror, spoke confidently for 3 minutes. Alan spoke for less than 1. The judge asked a single question. Was the transfer of ownership legally authorized at the time? Alan slid the paperwork forward. Stamped. Signed. Notarized. The judge read it. Then leaned forward. Petition denied. Gavel. Done. Kara didn't speak as she left. Didn't look at me. But I looked at her. Not to gloat. Not to sting. Just so she would know. I was still here. Still upright. Still unbroken. The courthouse hallway smelled like floor wax and old air. I stayed behind after the judge ruled, watching the room empty out, one echoing footstep at a time. Kara disappeared down the far end without so much as a glance back, just a beige blur headed toward another closed door. Alan walked beside me, silent for a moment before saying, "That was the cleanest ruling I've seen in a year." I didn't smile. Didn't pump a fist. Just said, "Good." Because that's what justice is supposed to be, clean, unemotional. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted clean endings. We shook hands in the parking lot. He looked me over once, then added, "You know, James would have hated courtrooms. But I think he would have been proud of the way you handled this one." I nodded. "I think he would have laughed when she tried to claim emotional distress," I said. Alan chuckled. "Definitely that." That evening, I returned home to find Lily waiting on my porch swing. Wrapped in a flannel blanket, her hair pulled into a loose bun, a takeout bag sitting beside her on the step. "I brought Chinese," she said. "Figured you wouldn't feel like cooking." I sat down next to her, the swing creaking under our weight. "You always know when I need orange chicken," I said. She handed me a pair of chopsticks. "I heard about the hearing." "Word travels fast in Ridgewater," I said, half smiling. "I'm glad you showed up," she said. "Sometimes just showing up changes everything." I looked at her for a long second. "I used to think showing up wasn't enough," I said. "But maybe it's the whole thing." Later that night, I opened the last drawer in James's desk, the one I hadn't touched since the funeral. I'd always told myself I was saving it for someday, but I think I just didn't want to deal with what might be inside. It held one item. A small wooden box with a broken hinge and a faded sticker from a gas station on the Oregon coast. Inside were keepsakes. A receipt from our first weekend getaway. A picture of me holding Darren as a baby, eyes tired but proud. A post-it note that read, "Don't forget, you did most of this." I folded it up and placed it in my jewelry box. Some things belong near your heart. The next day, I visited the women's shelter where the SUV proceeds had been donated. One of the residents, a soft-spoken woman named Nia, had taken the job readiness program and landed an interview with a local bakery. She hugged me. Not out of gratitude, exactly. Out of recognition. We had both been erased at some point. And now, we were both very much present. That night, I poured a glass of wine and stood in the doorway of the guest room I'd just finished repainting. It was soft and clean and quiet. And it looked like possibility. I thought about all the versions of myself who had lived in this house. The young bride learning how to budget in spiral notebooks. The new mother staring down midnight feedings. The middle-aged wife pretending not to notice the cracks forming in the walls of her family. The widow they tried to sideline. And now? Now I was the architect. I could tear down and rebuild however I wanted. On Sunday, Lily came by again. She had a key now. Not because she needed one, but because I wanted her to have it. She brought lemon bars, burnt on the edges but sweet in the middle. We ate them on the porch while the wind rattled the wind chime James had insisted on buying, even though it made more noise than music. If I ever missed how things were. I thought for a moment. No, I said. But I miss the people we were before we forgot how to protect what mattered. She nodded. Me too. I got one more letter that week. From Matthew. No email, no PDF, an actual envelope, handwritten. Inside was a simple note. I don't expect anything back. I just wanted to say I'm proud of you. No return address. No apology. But something about it landed softer than I thought it would. I didn't write back. Not yet. But I placed the letter next to the old photo of James in his fishing hat, bent at the corner from too many years of being moved but never thrown out. By Thursday, I had finished the draft of the fund's mission statement. The last line read, "You may be invisible to them, but we see you. And now, so will the world." I read it out loud. Twice. And then I cried. For everything that had been lost. And everything I was finally choosing to keep. That night, I opened every window in the house. The air was cool, clean. The curtains moved like they were breathing again. And I whispered something into the wind. Thank you, James. I've got the rest from here. It was the last Saturday of the month, and the farmer's market in Ridgewater had spilled into the library parking lot. Tables crowded with homemade jams and knitted socks, and more sourdough starters than I could count. I wasn't shopping. I was tabling. Right there between the pickled beet stand and a booth selling essential oils named after moon phases, I had a small folding table with a canvas sign that read, "The Second Chance Fund grants and support for widowed women over 60. People stopped. They asked questions. Some didn't say much, just nodded, took a pamphlet, walked away slowly, like the weight of their own stories was suddenly more visible in the sunlight. A woman named Marcy stood with her hand resting lightly on the table edge. She didn't take a pamphlet at first. She just said, "I thought I was the only one." I looked her in the eye and replied, "You never were. They just made you feel that way." She blinked hard, then picked up the form and whispered, "Thank you." And I felt it again, that ripple, the thing stronger than revenge, the thing bigger than control. Impact. Later that day, Lily stopped by with 2 iced coffees and a reusable bag full of misshapen peaches she'd gotten for half price because she smiled at the vendor. We sat on the porch, legs tucked under us, watching the sun ease its way down behind the trees. The air was thick with the scent of cut grass and grilled onions from someone's backyard cookout. "I signed up for classes," she said casually. "Oh yeah?" "Starting in September. 3 nights a week, human services, and an intro to psych class that looks brutal." "You'll survive," I said. "You survived us." She laughed, head thrown back, and for a second I saw the little girl who used to curl up in my lap during thunderstorms. Then she sobered, just a little. "I want to do something good with all of this," she said. "Something that helps." "You already are," I said. That night, I lit a candle. Just one. The living room stayed mostly dark. Shadows folding gently over the bookshelves, the framed photos, the place on the couch where James used to fall asleep reading. I looked around and realized something I hadn't felt fully until then. I wasn't guarding the house anymore. I was living in it again. I walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and flipped through the last stack of envelopes from the grant applications. The stories varied: widows abandoned, widows deceived, widows ignored. But there was a thread tying them all together: resilience. Not loud, not flashy, just quiet steel. Like the kind that holds up bridges long after storms pass. A few days later, I was invited to speak at a small local women's club. Nothing big, just 20 folding chairs in a church basement, next to a table with sheet cake and too much decaf. I told them my story. Not with drama, just with truth. And when I finished, a woman in the back raised her hand and said, "Do you ever regret not doing it sooner?" I thought about that for a long second, then said, no, because I wasn't ready sooner. I wasn't angry enough. I wasn't tired enough. I hadn't been pushed far enough. And sometimes, enough is the only thing that makes us finally stand up. By the end of the week, the porch swing had a new cushion. Blue and white stripes, soft enough to sleep on if you needed to. I found myself sitting there at dusk more often, glass of wine in hand, letting the quiet do what it was always meant to: heal. Lily texted me that Friday night. "Want to come to my class orientation next week? No pressure. Just feels right if you're there." I typed back, "I'd be honored." Then I stared at the screen for a while and added, "And bring snacks. Those things always run long." She sent back a row of laughing emojis and a heart. I saved the conversation. I save them all now. The following Sunday, I hosted a small gathering. Not a party. Just a few women I'd met through the fund. A potluck, folding chairs, a pitcher of lemonade, and a pie I didn't burn. We sat in a circle in the backyard, feet tucked into grass, hands wrapped around paper plates, telling stories in soft voices that got louder as the sun went down. "I thought I was crazy," one woman said. "I thought I was done," another whispered. "I thought I had to stay quiet," said a third. And I looked around at all of them, shoulders stronger than they looked, eyes clear from what they'd seen, and I said, "They told us quiet was noble. They were wrong. Quiet was just convenient for them." Heads nodded. Someone laughed. Someone cried. It felt like a beginning. When the last dish was packed and the chairs folded, I stood alone under the porch light. The sky above was velvet and scattered with stars. I whispered into the night, "I think we're going to be okay." And I meant it, because I had reclaimed more than just property, more than just accounts and deeds. I had reclaimed myself, and I wasn't handing that over to anyone again. Not even with a smile. The house is quiet now, but not in the way it used to be. Not like grief settled in and pulled the curtains shut. No, this quiet is different, softer, fuller. Like a room that's finally exhaled, after holding its breath too long. I sit in James's recliner, blanket over my knees, the lamp casting a golden pool over the floor. The wind hums through the cracked window, gentle, like it's humming a lullaby just for me. The world outside moves on. Cars pass, someone's dog barks, a train whistles miles away. But inside, the stillness wraps around me like a friend. It's strange how healing doesn't come all at once. It comes in pieces. In late-night texts and burned lemon bars, in court rulings and porch swings, in saying no when your voice still trembles, and in letting go of apologies you'll never receive. Sometimes we think justice has to be loud. A slam, a shout, a door ripped off the hinges. But I've learned the most powerful kind of justice is the one that whispers. You're safe now. You're seen. You're sovereign. So do anyone still sitting in a room where you're told to be quiet, where your worth is measured by what they think you can't do? Get up. Stand. even if your knees shake, even if your voice cracks. Reclaim the room. Because what they called weakness, that was the fire lighting your way out. And when you finally walk through that door, don't look back. There's nothing behind you that knows your name the way the future does. Sleep comes easy now. My name is mine again. My life is mine again. And every breath I take under this roof feels like a promise I kept to the woman who almost forgot her own power. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.